push through and punch through a vision with passion, a vision with passion.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Purpose by Design podcast. I am Pamela Henkel, and I'm so excited to have you here with us today. Today in Minnesota, where I'm coming to you from, well, I know there's winter happening all across the nation. It's just been crazy, but we are having these record cold temperatures, minus 22 and all these crazy things. But in and amongst all of that, staying warm by the fireplace, I have the pleasure of interviewing someone who has become a fast friend in my life. You are all going to be so blessed to hear her story today. Now, if you're watching us, then you're able to see that there's a beautiful lady with me wearing a crown, and you're like, who is that? Who is that? This is the reigning Miss Minnesota, Demi, I'm going to try to say her name, Radeva. Did I say it close?
Perfect.
Okay, Radeva. I'm working on rolling those R's. And Demi and I met through our mutual friend and coach. Her name is Sherry Kennedy. And Sherry said, Pammy, she calls me Pammy, you have to interview Demi for the podcast. So Demi and I connected, and we found out that not only do we have a lot in common, we know a lot of the same people in our lives that go back for years and years and years. So it has been so fun to chat with Demi and hear her story and reconnect with the past on so many levels. And I know that you all are going to love her story. So be ready. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to walk away inspired. So Demi, would you introduce yourself to all of us today? You look so beautiful.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here with you right now on this really cold day. It's a fun thing for us to do.
Yes.
I have so many definitions of who I am. I am a daughter. I'm an older sister. I am a healthcare enthusiast and change maker. I am a strategist by trade. I am someone who is a certified fitness instructor. I love to teach dance. I also love stuffed animals. Little fun fact about me. I am someone who is a recovering perfectionist. I am Bulgarian, but I'm also a Minnesota girl. I am so many different things that I'm very excited to talk to you about today. And I would say, one of the key things for me is that I am a believer. And there are no labels there. I'm human at my essence, and someone who is inspired and happy to be here with all of you.
That is beautiful. And, you are true to your essence. Getting to know you a little bit has been really wonderful as you've pulled the curtain back on who you are. There's a lot of people out there, no matter what crown they're wearing in life, that aren't really being real. And that is totally not you. And that's why you're a perfect person to be on the podcast, because you've had to go through some things in life and make quality decisions to pursue your purpose by design that has brought you right here. It wasn't handed to you. You didn't get a silver platter. You worked for it. You worked hard, and now it's paying off for you. But you will be sharing all of that with us. But the other thing to the listeners is, this is not a woman who is wearing a pretty crown and a sash and just a title holder. What she's doing with this is making a difference, especially even in even in the world with the things as it is. You are a bright light and bringing hope to a lot of people that might be stuck at home or looking for new ways to be healthy. You are just bringing so much hope, and I want to thank you for that. And I'm so excited for everybody to hear all about you. Now, you had a testimonial that you wanted to share, and this would be a great place to kind of warm us up a little bit to who you are and what you do. Would you be willing to share that with us now, Demi?
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
I was reflecting upon what I would say here, and I actually had to Google the word testimonial, as I am international. Sometimes I don't really know what these words mean. And there was a framework for what how one would lay out a testimonial, saying you need to have a problem. What was the solution? What was unique about it? You know, share your experience and then capture in a summary what that overall message is. And so as I was trying to lay out these key points, you know, one key problem is just navigating life. Being human, every single one of us is faced with problems.
Yes.
And one big solution for me that, let me tell you, I haven't been perfect at it because I absolutely struggle to kind of give up control. But a big solution that I've noticed I get a lot of peace from if I just give that problem or issue to God and I just release it. Because in order for it to become a problem, I don't know what the solution is. I don't know the right path to take. I don't know the right approach in that moment. And so I just give it to him. And I do my part, of course, but it is amazing how many times when I have done that, I have been surprised beyond my wildest beliefs, the connections that have happened and the solutions that have opened up in front of me that I didn't even realize existed there. And I've gone through a lot in my life, and I'm so excited to share with you some of the stories in my life. And a lot of people tell me that I'm an old soul. A lot of this has to do with just the fact that I've experienced a lot in my life. And so my overall message is that believing, trusting the process, giving it to God can really help you just relax and open your eyes to things and solutions that you might not have noticed because in the moment you were trying so hard to control the outcome of a situation.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about my testimonial.
And that is something you're bringing. I mean, you shared it right now, and it's part of who you are that you're bringing into every part of you as the reigning Miss Minnesota. I loved how you connected the trusting the process to turning it over to God. I love that because you hear turn it over to God and you hear trust the process. But if you truly turn it over to God, then you have no other really choice but to what? Trust the process. That was fabulous. That was fabulous. So tell us about the night that you had that crown placed on your head or anything leading up to it, whatever you want to tell our listeners, because this is the first time we have had a reigning queen on our podcast. So we want to hear all about it.
Well, my experience was anything but traditional. I think a lot of us imagine a big, beautiful stage. We have all the beautiful contestants and the judges reveal the answer of who gets the title. And then the previous title holder places a crown on the new title holder's head. Well, that was not my experience. But before I get there, let me tell you about when I didn't win. So I actually started competing in pageants in 2020, right before the pandemic happened. And I did end up being on stage and competing with beautiful other women and against amazing platforms that deserve a ton of visibility. How did I get there? I had just graduated from my graduate program at the London School of Economics and Healthcare Management, and I had moved back to Minnesota because I took a new job here with United Healthcare in our Minnesota community. It's a big employer, and I was so excited to be able to come back and give back and make change happen at scale at this large organization. But I felt really lonely. I felt like I didn't have a community. I felt like I didn't have a network. A lot of my friends had also moved abroad or moved to other states. A lot of them had settled down. And I wanted to create a community around myself with strong, powerful women who were business owners, who stood for something. And then I also felt this urge to do something greater than myself. For many years, I had been volunteering, but I just felt like I had learned so much that I just wanted to figure out a way how to get the word out there, how to do even more than what I had been able to accomplish. And then there was one more piece to the equation. I felt like I lacked in confidence. That was something that I had struggled over my whole life. And I would say I probably see myself more of as a nerd than a beauty queen, as I had spent, thousands of hours studying, but never really up on stage and doing pageantry. So that is when I had noticed one of my friends, Valentina. She had become Mrs. Minnesota a few years prior. Actually, while I was abroad, I remember noticing all the posts that she was doing, all the beautiful change that I saw in her. And so I reached out and said, I feel like you had an amazing experience and you met such amazing people through that. I'd love to do the same. Will you tell me more? So Valentina shared her story with me, and I'm so grateful that she did. And not only did she share her story, she actually helped me with photos, hair, makeup, really trying to get set up and connected. And she recommended that I work with Cherry. So that is actually how I learned about Cherry. And so I decided these are my 3 goals. I wanted to create the community. I wanted to do something greater than me, and I wanted to work on my confidence. So I decided to participate in the pageant, and it was something I had never done before. I learned how to do public speaking. I learned how to do storytelling. I learned how to conduct myself. And I had done a lot of that professionally. I rose really quickly through the company and have position of a director now. So professionally, that I had done a lot of that, but personally, it was hard for me to translate it. Personally, I was very quiet and just would keep to myself most of the time. And so I didn't have the same influence that I did, for example, in the way that I did at work with my colleagues. And so that was, that's where I learned a lot of these skills, and I met amazing friends, lifelong friends. And the day of the pageant, I couldn't explain it, but everything went perfect. It was one of those moments where I kept looking around thinking, is this real? How is everything going so well? All of my outfits were fine. There was no issues. All of the talking on stage, I didn't stumble for one word. Everything was absolutely pristine. And when it came down to it, I did not even place. I did not even hear my name called on that stage. And I walked away. And I was so caught off guard because I felt like I had done so much. I had built up my platform around childhood nutrition. I had done so many community volunteering events. I had fundraised thousands of dollars for my partner organizations. I felt like I had done so much work, and some of the other contestants had entered the pageant just a few months prior, while I had spent years building this platform. So I couldn't, in a way, believe what was happening. But let me tell you, if I go back to that point earlier around learning to be confident, standing on that stage and knowing all I knew and trusting that I had given everything, I had given it my all, and then being told no, that was the biggest lesson in confidence I could have ever learned in my life. Yeah. Because it showed me I did not need anyone's approval to know that I have done what I've done, and that I am, standing up there and sharing my message as best as I could in that moment. So that was one critical lesson that I learned for myself in that moment. Now, all of this is happening. I thought I was never going to do pageantry. When I came into the process, I thought, okay, I'm going to do this for 1 year. I'm going to learn all the lessons I'm going to learn, and I'm never going to do it again. Little did I know, the following year, actually, the reigning Mrs. Minnesota, Erin, reached out to me, and she said, Demi, This was such an amazing experience. You have to come to nationals, but to come to nationals, you have to win the Miss Minnesota title. You have to win the state title. And so I thought to myself, you know, I have nothing to lose. Why not try again and see what happens? And so I did. But this time I reflected back on what are some of the things that I had done that I could improve upon. And I think one critical thing stood out to me. I had spent a lot of time reflecting back on authenticity and trying to be true to myself. And one of the things that I noticed was that while my platform was focused on childhood nutrition, and it still is, I was sharing the story of my mom. I wasn't sharing Demi's story. I was sharing the story of my mom. And my mom's story is a part of my greater story of, you know, what Demi has experienced. But my mom's experience is only one piece of the whole puzzle. There's a whole story we'll go into around food insecurity, and then my mom and her diagnosis with chronic disease, and then just all of the things that I've learned being a professional within healthcare. Have all those three things have contributed to me deciding to focus on childhood nutrition as my platform. And that was one key thing that I changed. I wanted to share Demi's story. And so I did. And the moment I made that shift and changed that message, it was amazing how powerful and how much it started to resonate with everybody. And ultimately it led to my win. So biggest lesson is always share your story and be confident that you know your thing. I mean, no one has the same experience as you. And so that's the best thing you can do is just share your story and stay authentic and true to yourself.
That is so cool. You didn't quit. You went back and said, I'm going to take everything I've learned. I'm going to do it again. And then to get quiet within yourself and listen, like, what can I tweak? And that is powerful because you, of course, were honoring your mother and father, honoring mom, which is scriptural, right? But yet you needed to, people wanted to get drawn into who you are. Who's Demi? Not just who's your mom, right? And what is, okay, so she knows all this about nutrition and wellness and health, but who is she? Why should I listen to her? What makes her the expert on a personal level? And so you just went after that. That is so amazing. Okay, so now tell us your amazing life story, because I mean, I sat there on like pins and needles when you were talking about it, because I felt like we were on an awesome roller coaster ride. Like, what could happen next?
What's going to happen next?
So I'm excited for everybody to hear just what's the backstory, because I think we get this image of the queen with her crown and, you know, and all of that, and can forget that she has a backstory. Like, there's been stuff that she's gone through that has made her who she is today. She's not the sum of her mistakes or the sum of her challenges, but it certainly is an impactful part of why you are the way you are. So I want you to tell us, share from your heart all about your backstory. Tell us about Demi.
Well, before I dive into all of the crazy ups and downs, I did want to share a little bit about where I was actually born and where I was raised, because I think it's a very important piece to the whole story. And I've grown up in that environment, and I think it could be helpful to the listeners to plus it would be a fun fact. So if you're ever doing some trivia, these things might come up and you'll have the answers.
Yes.
So I was born in a city called Henkel in Bulgaria. And Henkel actually is a place in the world that has the tallest monument of Mother of God in the world. It's 102 feet or 31 meters tall, and it's listed in the Guinness Book of World Records. So that is in the city that I was born.
Wow.
Now, in the city that I was raised, they're really close to each other. In the city that I was raised, it's called Plovdiv today, in modern day, but it used to be called Philippe or Philippi. And there's a whole chapter in the Bible, the Philippians,
Yes.
that is actually, all of that action happens in the town that I was raised in.
Seriously.
Philippopolis. Seriously. So this, in this city, it's one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. And in 2019, it was it was the European Culture Capital in 2019. And they had all kinds of festivities, cultural events, poetry, theater, all kinds of beautiful, beautiful things around the city. But there's so much history in that city. Every time I walk to school, every time I walk to go to my grandma, I would pass an amphitheater, ancient Greek theaters. I would pass Roman bullfighting rinks and things. And so it was just amazing to be surrounded by all of that culture. And there's so much that continues to be uncovered today. Some of the latest kind of restorations and excavations have revealed tons of items from early Christianity. So the predominant religion in Bulgaria is Christian Orthodox, and that is what I was Christian with. I was Christian Orthodox. And there's just so many beautiful churches and history in that city. And to a large extent, that influenced who I was as a person. And one thing, when we moved here to the US, there was no more of these churches. And not 90% of the population didn't believe or practice in the same way that I was used to, where we would have these beautiful gold icons and beautiful buildings that we would go and worship in. And so when we moved here, and all of a sudden, I was living in a community where we had one church to our left, another church to our right. They believed in completely different things. All of a sudden, I felt very, very lost. I'm going to get a little emotional here.
That's all right. There's a lot of change. And that's why your story is so beautiful. So you just take a moment, take two.
Oh, sorry.
Don't be sorry.
It was a really difficult time for me because I felt like what I had believed in was gone. All of a sudden, that it wasn't true. It was being questioned. There was all these different ways to practice. There was, there was no church to be in. You could, people would say, oh, you could just be with your family. You could be in your community. And that is what the church is supposed to be, is that you're just surrounded by people that are, believers with you. So it was a difficult time for me where I just didn't know. Had I just spent all this time believing in the wrong things, wow. I started questioning my own belief system. And that is where we actually also met some wonderful, wonderful people. And I'm kind of jumping here ahead of the story. This is amazing. I actually had notes, everybody. I spent some time thinking through my story because there's just so many things happening, but it's funny that I'm being drawn in this direction. It's just to say that, we all go through moments where we question our belief systems. So we question what is real and what is not real. And we come up with different answers. I mean, for everybody, that experience could have led me to completely give up, all belief. But to me, all of the things that I had to go through with my family following that only confirmed and strengthened my belief.
Wow.
But I'm going to pause here. Catch my breath.
Demi, can I
And
ask
then,
you how old you were?
go
Just,
ahead.
just as you were sharing that, how old were you when all of a sudden you're here and, faith has been a foundation of your life. And not only a foundation, like you said, there was a certain style, the building, a certain type of expression of worship, and all of a sudden that's gone. And here you are trying to navigate through that new landscape, which I'm sure in the end has made your faith all the more strong. It's stronger now because there's a different grounding for you. There's a different anchor for you now. But as you came here and you're navigating through all this, how old are you? Because I can see that it still is impactful for you to talk about it. So yeah, how old were you?
I was 14. I had just celebrated my 14th birthday. And that is when we literally within a week, a few days, we actually left my country and the hometown I was living in and moved to the States. Wow. And at the time we did not even, we didn't have the money or means to actually go back for 5+ years. So it took us a long time to really be able to get to a place where we can go back and even visit with family and my grandparents and see everybody. So I was fairly young when I experienced all of this in a very short amount of time. It was a lot of difficult situations that we had to navigate through as a family. And I have a very small family. It's just my mom, my dad, and my younger brother. Actually, my brother and I have 14 years difference. He was born just a few months before we had to make the leap across the ocean. And yeah, it's a big difference. So I don't, looking back on it, my mom and my dad, I don't know how they got the strength within themselves to pick up with a 14-year-old and a 6-month-old baby without speaking the language, with no jobs, with nothing really planned out, and just went for it. And that was such a huge leap of faith and belief that somehow something was going to protect us and allow us to have this new beginning.
Yes, huge.
Yeah. So a little sidetrack there, but to get back to the kind of original point I was making is I grew up surrounded by all of this kind of just beauty and kind of also in a way similar way of practicing, right? I also grew up with an orchard. So my grandpa in the town that I was born in, that's where my grandparents lived. And my grandpa and my grandma ran an orchard and they had a vineyard as well. And so I remember very vividly, I would go there during the summer on weekends and I'd spend time with them, just planting, collecting different plants, cooking and canning with my grandma, which I loved. And that taught me so much about where plants and food came from. It taught me about saving up for the future. So with canning with my grandma, we'd always can in the summer, and then we'd open up these delicious compotes in the winter, these juices with peaches and pears. And I think, that is where some of the passion for nutrition comes from too, is that when I do this work, it kind of ties me back to my roots and to my grandparents and what I experienced there on that orchard and vineyard. I mean, I didn't understand this or didn't know this at the time, but we were very lucky because so many other people struggled to actually put food on the table. And so for us to have that little piece of land where we could plant and raise plants and actually create food for ourselves, that was a way to sustain ourselves. So I was born right after the Soviet Union broke apart in 91. And a lot of people didn't have the means to be able to have food. And so this was a way for my grandparents to actually be able to put food on the table for themselves. Didn't understand it at the time, but again, as a child is just stuck with me as this memory of how amazing it was to be able to spend time together with my family, to raise these plants, to do a collective activity together, to build our relationship in that way.
Yeah,
and so I wanted to, you know, in a way, some of the platform comes from my childhood and having that experience. And then being able to kind of bring it back. There's such an amazing community about gardening, which is one of the things that I've been working on is, you know, trying to advocate for creating gardens in schools, I think, or even in neighborhoods. I think there's so much to be learned and shared in community to be created from planting next to your neighbor and then, you know, planting together, thinking about what are we going to plant next year. And it just helps build those relationships. It's a collective activity. So yeah, I think, you know, we were one of the lucky ones that had the opportunity to do that. Now, we got lucky again. So years later, my godfather, who spoke perfect English and just had a beautiful family, they were all, you know, to me, every time I saw them, they almost seemed foreign. They were just always so proper and beautiful. And for years, he spoke perfect English. He had gone to school for that. For years, he had tried to win what is now known as the lottery, the green card lottery. And so he had applied and applied and applied. I don't know for how many years, you know, at least 5-6 years. And he told my mom, this is the last year I'm applying. You know, if this year doesn't work out and we don't win, I'm done. I already know the process. I've gone through it so many times. Would you like for me to submit your documents as well and just see what happens? So jokingly, my family used to joke, oh, we were always so unlucky, like this is never going to happen. Jokingly decided, okay, well, let's just give it a try and see what happens, especially because my mom had just gotten pregnant too, and we were living in a studio apartment. So there was, they were actually sleeping in the living room, and they had been so kind to allow me to sleep in the one bedroom where the kitchen was. We actually had to move the kitchen to the balcony because of how small it was. I mean, I'm talking, we were living in probably how big our living room is today in my house, in our family's house. So we were living in a really tight space, and we were expecting a baby. And my mom, you know, just decided to go for it. Why not? You know, let's submit the documents, see what happens. And if anything, we'll just like learn how the process works. So my godfather took all of that, applied. We even forgot about it. I don't think anyone was expecting anything. And then a few months later, I think I had just come home from school, and I love to check the mail. It's very unusual. So here in the US, you know, getting mail is like a regular thing. Every day you probably have 6, 7, 10 letters. Back home, it was very unusual to get mail. And so this one day I'm coming home from school, and then I look in a mailbox, and there's like a big white packet sticking out of there. I'm like, oh my God, what is that? And immediately had to open it, got really excited, ran up to my parents and showed them what it was. That, you know, I didn't know what it was at the time. And then that packet contained our invitation to go to the American Embassy for an interview for a green card, which was completely, you know, unexpected. We were completely caught off guard. And there was so many too expenses that were associated with this. I mean, going through a green card process is just so expensive. So my parents were trying to figure out, can we actually even afford this? I remember my godfather told my parents, you have to do this. For so many years, I have tried and never succeeded. You did it once, and you got so lucky. You just have to go for it. So we did. And we applied. And I remember a month or so later, we were in the capital city of Sofia, and got called up to interview at the American Embassy with an American. And, you know, it was just such an unusual, out of worldly experience because I had very, if any, exposure to foreigners at all at that point in time in my life. So it just felt very, exactly, outworldly. Like, what is this place? Where are we at? I don't understand what's happening. And I just remember him saying, "Welcome to America. You got it." And we all just didn't know what just happened. And I then remember him saying, "You have 6 months to set foot in American land or you lose your rights." Okay. And so that was that. We had 6 months to figure out all our finances and sell everything, be able to pay for all the documents that we had to submit as part of the process. And we made it over. And the first place we went to actually was in Pennsylvania. So that is the state where we went. It was a connection of my mom. We didn't really have any close friends that had lived in the States at the time. Didn't really know anyone. Again, my parents didn't have jobs negotiated prior to moving or anything like that. And so I remember walking on the side of the highway. There's no sidewalk. It's not like European cities where we have sidewalks everywhere. Walking on the side of the highway for about, I don't know if it was like 3 or 5 miles from the city where we were staying into Pittsburgh, which was the bigger city. And then knocking from business, like going door to door from business to business, while my mom is with the baby and my dad is right next to her. And we would walk in and I would say, "My parents are looking for a job. Do you have anything?" And it was actually right around 2004, 2005. So there was a little mini crisis there and there was not that many jobs. And I remember the biggest struggle for me was how to tell my parents, this person is saying, "Yes, of course, absolutely. Here's an application, go ahead, apply." But that meant that they most likely didn't have the job. So we went through so many different applications. We went through so many different businesses because we didn't, and I tried to do my best. I probably had mistakes and things. I only took a couple of years of English before, completely being uprooted and moving. Right. So I quickly had to adjust and navigate because now it was no longer about just my survival. It was my whole family. Like, how do we survive? How do we make it? So they weren't able to find jobs. My mom wasn't, my dad wasn't. We tried and tried and tried for a couple of months. And at this point, we already, we were spending money of properties and things that we had sold. We were kind of running low and we came to a question, do we stay or do we go? So that is when, I don't know if it was my mom or my dad, they found the phone number of college friends that they had gone to school with that had moved to the States a decade prior. And so called them. They didn't even know if this was the right number or not. Called them and it was them. And they said, when we said, "We're calling from American soil, we're here, where are you guys?" And and we don't know, we don't know, do we stay or do we go? So then they said, "No, we are going back. You have to come up here." And we said, "Up where?" And that's when they said Minnesota. So we had no idea where Minnesota was on the map. But shortly thereafter, we found out where it was. So we moved to Minnesota and it has been our home for almost 20 years now, and absolutely love it up here. And coming to Minnesota, this is where, we connected with some of our mutual friends, like you mentioned earlier. This is, I think, one of the most helpful things was finding the church and the Bulgarian church. There was a Bulgarian church here in Minnesota at the time. And so through that, we built a lot of relationships. There was young kids my age that we actually even ended up going to the same high school for a while there and went to the same university here at the University of Minnesota. So it was a really nice way to build our community, to create a support network around ourselves. They helped my parents get jobs, and for me to even figure out how to enroll in school and things like that. So that's what brings us to, we started to kind of establish ourselves in the community. And I had started going to school, so my language was improving quite fast because I was always surrounded by native speakers. And I was really curious to learn, what are all these school clubs and what is this thing called volunteering? I didn't know what volunteering was at the time. So I was really curious, and I had to babysit my brother every time I wasn't in school. So I didn't have the opportunity to really do a lot of things after school, unfortunately. But if I could, sneak in a few activities here and there, that's what the opportunity of kind of serving on some of these school organizations gave me that opportunity. So that is where I learned about volunteering. There was an organization called SERVE, which stood for Serving Elk River with Volunteer Enthusiasm. That's where we lived, Elk River, for the first few years. And I loved the experience so much. I was able to create, through volunteering, I was able to build friendships, to create a community around myself that I didn't anymore have because all of my friends were back home.
Sure.
And I needed new friends. So through all of this volunteering, I was able to build these connections and became the vice president of the club. And then that's when, as vice president, then had to make the decision, okay, well, what kind of volunteering activities would we do? And we had gotten, note that one of the local food shelters was in need of non-perishables. They needed funds to be raised. And so we got to work, and actually collectively there was an activity called Snow Week. It was a full week of all of these school clubs that got together and did volunteering and tried to raise as much money and goods as they could. So that year we raised a record amount of tons of non-perishable foods and a record amount of donations in terms of funds, which was amazing. And I just felt so fulfilled, and I felt so good about being able to give back to this community that helped sustain us. And in the beginning, it was so hard for us. We were below the poverty line for a while. And so we needed access to the food shelf. We needed access to certain services. I was definitely a beneficiary of discounted and free lunches at school as well, because we just couldn't afford it. And some days that's what I would depend on, was whatever, was at school.